So let's talk photography basics. What is exposure and how does it work? Exposure refers to the amount of light that reaches the sensor. It directly affects the brightness and darkness of the entire image. Achieving proper exposure is crucial in photography to ensure that the image accurately represents the scene's lighting conditions. The camera is constructed in 3 layers. Your light-sensitive sensor, which is protected from being exposed to light by a shutter curtain, and the lens is in front of the curtain, which will help you control the variables. When you push the button of a camera, you're basically lifting the curtain that covers the light-sensitive sensor, exposing it to light adjusted by the lens. Exposure is controlled by 3 fundamental elements: aperture, shutter speed, and ISO sensitivity. Aperture refers to the size of the lens opening, which determines the amount of light passing through onto the sensor. Shutter speed refers to the duration of the time the shutter curtain remains open, allowing the light to reach the sensor. And ISO sensitivity, which refers to the sensor's sensitivity to capturing light. The relationship between these 3 factors is often referred to as the exposure triangle. Adjusting one parameter affects the others to maintain proper exposure. If you increase the shutter speed, making it faster, you reduce the amount of light reaching the sensor, which may require a wider aperture or a higher ISO to compensate for the reduced light. If you decrease the shutter speed, making it slower, you allow more light to reach the sensor, which might require to narrow the aperture or lower the ISO to prevent overexposure. Let's use a water tap as an example to really visualize how exposure works. Imagine you have a water tap and you want to fill a bucket with water. The flow of water represents the amount of light entering the camera, and the bucket is the camera sensor. The aperture can be compared to the amount of water coming through the tap opening. Opening the tap wide allows more water to flow, just like a larger aperture lets more light in. Closing the tap partially restricts the flow of the water, similar to a smaller aperture, reducing the amount of light coming through. Shutter speed can be compared to the time the tap remains open. If you open the tap for longer duration, more water will flow into the bucket, representing a longer shutter speed that allows more light to reach the sensor. On the other hand, a shorter tap opening time corresponds to a faster shutter speed, reducing the amount of light reaching the sensor. With this analogy, the bigger the water tap is opened, the less time you require to fill the bucket. The more closed the tap is, the longer it will take to take the same amount of water to fill the bucket. When one variable goes up, the other one goes down. In photography, is exactly the same. The more light that can come through the opening, the smaller the opening needs to be. If there is less light coming through, you need a wider opening to expose to the sensor. Lastly, let's talk about ISO sensitivity, which is the sensor's ability to capture light. In the water tap analogy, ISO sensitivity can be compared to the size of the bucket. A larger bucket can collect more water, just like a higher ISO sensitivity captures more light. And the opposite, a smaller bucket collects less water, similar to a lower ISO sensitivity, being less able to capture light. By adjusting the aperture, shutter speed, and ISO, you can control the amount of light reaching the camera sensor. Balancing these 3 elements allows you to achieve proper exposure, ensuring the image is neither overexposed, too much light, resulting in an image that is too bright, nor underexposed, not enough light, resulting in an image that is too dark. Just like adjusting the water tap to fill the container to an optimal level without overflowing or leaving it empty. When it comes to adjusting exposure on your camera, we're going to learn how to do this manually later on. Every digital camera has a built-in light meter. This light meter will measure the light available in front of you, and if set in automatic exposure, will choose a random aperture, a random shutter speed, and a random ISO value to make the meter be 0, or to make a perfect exposure. When the meter is at 0, it means perfect exposure. It is not under nor overexposed. If the meter marks between minus and 0, it is underexposed. If the meter marks between 0 and plus, it is overexposed. Our goal for now is to make our meter happy, and happy is 0. When you set your camera in manual exposure, you will start with selecting either an aperture, a shutter speed, and an ISO, and then adjusting the other 2 values to keep the meter at 0.